I would say, just kind of in general terms, Beethoven is such an exciting composer. You know, we were here. We are at the end of the classical era. We're moving into romantic era, and you know, Beethoven was kind of catapulting us into that. And the Mass, in particular, has so many of the elements that we kind of think of when we think of Beethoven's music. You know, big sound, large orchestra, large chorus, lots of kind of complicated harmonies. It's an exciting piece because it is in some ways a very traditional Mass, but then with Beethoven's spin. I was doing some research when I was working on the music, and they talked about the key relationships just in the first movement, when you have your Kyrie eleison, Christe eleison, Kyrie eleison, where normally the composer would go, you know, 1-5-1. He actually goes to the third, 1-3-1. So instead of C to G, C to E. So you hear that in the music. That's actually one of the things I would suggest to people to listen to, is kind of the interesting key relationships. But you know, the most exciting thing is just the big sound, the big full orchestra on stage. I think one of the neat things when you're listening to a Mass, and I would say this is true of a lot of different composers, but especially in Beethoven, there's this great interplay between the chorus and the soloist. A lot of back and forth where the chorus sets up a melody or a motive, then the soloist, the quartet, takes over, runs with that for a little while, and they kind of trade back and forth throughout the movement. So it's a nice thing to listen to if you're sitting out in the audience, to hear that interplay between those two groups. Well, selfishly, the Benedictus is probably where the quartet is most featured in the piece. It's kind of a long movement in the whole piece, so we're featured a lot throughout it. So for very selfish reasons, that's kind of the place that probably sticks out the most to me. But you know, when you get to the end and the chorus, and then the soloists come in a little bit, but the chorus is really singing the Dona Nobis Pacem, the Give Us Peace. That's so powerful, so moving. You've gone through this whole Mass, and you get to the end, and it's all about just kind of, we need peace, which, you know, is appropriate at any time, but I feel very appropriate at this time. Well, one of the things that can be a challenge or difficult to do is you have, you know, 4 singers that come together. Maybe you've worked together, maybe you haven't, but all of a sudden you have to find a way to blend those 4 different voices together in, you know, a couple of rehearsals. We'll have a rehearsal with the maestro before our first rehearsal with the orchestra for about an hour. We'll have 2 rehearsals with the orchestra, and then the concerts on Saturday night. So in a very kind of short amount of time, we have to figure out, okay, how do we make the 4 of us balance each other and sound good, and make sure you can hear all the parts at the same time in a very short amount of time. So that can be a challenge, but that's, you know, that's why we're musicians, and that's part of the job. So we'll do it. Well, you know, there is the kind of the standard, you know, sitting down and working through notes and rhythms, and making sure that you have your music prepared. But then there's also being familiar with the text, knowing what the different parts of the Mass are and what they mean. That's important. Knowing kind of what you're supposed to do in terms of dynamics. Yes, we're going to go in and we're going to meet with Maestro before, and he's going to give us some more concrete ideas. But because it's such a compressed period of time to put it all together, you have to already have some of that stuff worked out. So hopefully you've done some research and you've made some good decisions. If they happen to not be the decisions that Maestro wants, then you're flexible and you change them. But you know, Chris in particular is a very collaborative conductor, so he's open to ideas, which is so nice as a musician, to have someone who wants feedback but also is looking at the big picture and knows what needs to happen in the context of the piece.